I was the only one at Grandma's funeral. They all said she wasn't worth missing work for. If you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to stay updated with more content like this. Your support means everything to our channel. The funeral home was silent except for the soft melody of Amazing Grace playing through hidden speakers. I sat alone in the front row, staring at my grandmother's casket, adorned with a simple arrangement of white lilies, her favorite. The funeral director glanced at his watch for the third time, then at the empty chairs behind me. His eyes met mine with a look of uncomfortable pity. "Mr. Bennett, we typically wait 15 minutes past the scheduled time, but it's been half an hour now. Would you like to proceed?" he asked in a practiced, sympathetic tone. I nodded, unable to find my voice. The reality was crushing. I was the only one who had shown up. My phone had remained silent all morning except for a series of text messages from my relatives, each with their own excuse. "Can't make it. Big meeting with clients today. Send my condolences. Uncle Robert. Sorry about Grandma, but Tommy has a soccer tournament this weekend. You understand? Aunt Sarah. The drive is too long, and gas prices are insane right now. I'll catch the next family funeral. Cousin Mike. And the most cutting of all, from my own sister. Let's be real. James. Grandma was difficult. No one's going to miss work for someone who barely remembered our names at the end. I've got a deadline. Call me next week." The service proceeded with an awkward brevity. The pastor, who had never met my grandmother, delivered generic platitudes about a woman he knew nothing about. His words echoed hollowly in the empty room as I clutched a worn photo album in my lap, the one thing I'd taken from her apartment before her children descended, like vultures to divide her belongings, as the final hymn faded. I approached the casket alone. I placed my hand on the polished wood and whispered, "I'm here, Grandma Eleanor. I remember. And I promise they'll remember too, soon enough." The cemetery was no different. Just me, the funeral director, and two groundskeepers waiting impatiently by their idling truck. After the briefest of ceremonies, they lowered her casket into the ground with mechanical efficiency. I tossed a single lily onto the descending box, watching as the only person who had truly shaped my life disappeared into the earth. I drove home alone through a rainstorm that seemed perfectly timed, my windshield wipers barely keeping up with my tears. My phone buzzed with text messages asking if the funeral was over yet and whether there was anything good in the will. That night I opened my laptop and began documenting everything I knew about the family fortune that none of them realized existed. The inheritance they had all dismissed along with the woman they couldn't be bothered to honor for a single day. They would all remember Grandma Eleanor very soon. I grew up as the forgotten child in a family obsessed with status and success. My father was a high-powered attorney who rarely came home before midnight, and my mother was too busy with charity galas and social climbing to notice my existence. My sister Jessica quickly learned that achievement was the only currency our parents valued, so she threw herself into becoming the perfect daughter. Straight A's, debate team captain, and later, a ruthless corporate executive like our father. Was different, quieter, more interested in books than business. My parents saw this as weakness, but Grandma Eleanor saw it as strength. Every summer from age 8 until I left for college, I was sent to stay with her in her modest farmhouse in rural Vermont. My parents presented it as a punishment. Maybe manual labor will straighten him out. But those summers were my salvation. Grandma Eleanor had been a professor of literature before retiring to tend her gardens and beehives. Her farmhouse walls were lined with thousands of books, and her mind was sharper than anyone I'd ever known. While my cousins and sister pitied my banishment, I was receiving an education more valuable than anything their prestigious summer programs could offer. "People are temporary, James," she would tell me as we tended her vegetable garden. "But land is forever. And knowledge? That's the only true inheritance." She taught me how to grow food from seed, how to repair rather than replace, and how to see beauty in the rhythms of nature. In the evenings, we would sit on her porch and she would read aloud from Thoreau, Whitman, and her favorite, Mary Oliver. Then she would ask questions that made me think deeply about what we'd read. When I struggled with math in school, she taught me through carpentry, measuring twice, calculating angles, understanding proportion and balance. When I was bullied for being different, she showed me that standing apart from the crowd was something to cherish, not fear. "Your family values only what can be counted, James," she once told me after my father had berated me for bringing home a B+, while Jessica was celebrated for her perfect report card. But the most important things in life cannot be counted at all. As I grew older, I noticed how my family treated her. They would visit rarely, usually when they needed something. They called her eccentric and difficult when she refused to conform to their materialistic values. They rolled their eyes when she spoke of sustainability or quoted poetry instead of stock prices. At family gatherings, they would talk around her, not to her. When she offered wisdom from her decades of experience, they would exchange knowing glances, as if age had made her foolish rather than wise. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to learn, was that Grandma Eleanor had been quietly brilliant with her finances. While living simply, she had invested early in sustainable technology companies long before they became trendy. Her eccentric interest in organic farming had led her to purchase shares in what became the largest organic food producer in the country. The land they mocked her for tending had quadrupled in value as the surrounding area developed. And yet, as she aged and needed more help, the family visits became even less frequent. When she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 3 years ago, I was the one who drove her to appointments. When she could no longer live alone, I was the one who found her a quality care facility near my home, so I could visit daily. My family's excuse was always the same. "We're just so busy. You have more time because your career isn't as demanding." The truth was, I had built a successful independent architectural practice specifically so I could structure my time around caring for her. I had designed my life with values she had taught me, prioritizing what mattered most. Now, as I sat in my apartment the night after her lonely funeral, I realized that none of them had ever truly known her. And soon, they would regret their ignorance, more than they could imagine. During the last 3 years, I had noticed subtle changes in my grandmother. Despite her declining memory, she had moments of startling clarity. During one such moment about 2 years ago, she had beckoned me close, to her bed at the care facility. "James, there's a leather-bound copy of Walden in my bookcase at home. Bring it to me next time." When I did, she opened it with trembling hands to reveal a hollowed-out section containing a small brass key and a folded document. "This is for you," she whispered. "There's a safety deposit box at Vermont National Bank. Everything is explained inside. Don't tell the others yet. They wouldn't understand." I had respected her wishes, visiting the bank only after her passing. Inside the box, I found detailed financial records, investment portfolios, and a letter written in her familiar, elegant handwriting from before her illness had progressed. The truth was staggering. Grandma Eleanor was worth over $40 million. The family had always assumed she lived modestly because she had to. In reality, she had chosen simplicity while her investments flourished. The letter explained everything: how she had watched the family become increasingly materialistic, how she had tested them over the years by asking for their time rather than offering money, and how consistently they had failed that test. Her instructions were clear. As executor of her estate, a detail she had never shared with the family, I was to give them one last chance to show their true character. Over the next few weeks, I began laying the groundwork for her final lesson. I scheduled individual meetings with each family member, telling them only that Grandma had left some personal items for them, and I needed to discuss inheritance matters. My Uncle Robert was first. He canceled twice before finally agreeing to meet me for Exactly 30 minutes. During his lunch break, his corner office overlooked the city, awards and credentials covering nearly every wall surface. "So, what did the old lady leave?" he asked without preamble, checking his watch as he sat across from me. "I hope you didn't drag me into this meeting for sentimental junk. My assistant already cleared my apartment of that stuff when she died." I kept my face neutral. "Actually, I wanted to talk about the funeral first." He waved dismissively. "Look, I had clients in town, millions on the line. She would have understood business comes first. Always did." "Did she?" I asked quietly. "When was the last time you actually had a conversation with her?" He shifted uncomfortably. "What's this about, James? I'm a busy man." I placed a small box on his desk. "She wanted you to have this." Inside was a handwritten letter and a faded photograph of him at age 7, sitting on her lap as she read him a story. The letter simply said, "Robert, you once told me you wanted to be a teacher, to help children learn. What happened to that? Boy? He is missed. With love always, Mom." His face flushed. "This is why you called me in? To make me feel guilty?" She was senile at the end. "She wrote that 5 years ago," I said softly. "Before any cognitive decline." "What about actual assets?" he demanded, composure slipping. "There must have been some real inheritance." I stood to leave. "We'll discuss that after I've met with everyone." She left specific instructions. His expression darkened. "Is this some kind of game? Because if you're manipulating this situation, the way you manipulated your way out of caring for her for the past decade," I interrupted, surprising myself with my boldness. "I'll be in touch about the next meeting." Similar scenes played out with Aunt Sarah and Cousin Mike, each receiving small, personal reminders of moments they had shared with Grandma, each responding with varying degrees of discomfort and barely concealed greed. My sister Jessica was the most difficult. Unlike the others, she didn't even pretend to have regrets. In her sleek, minimalist apartment, she examined the childhood bracelet Grandma had kept all these years with clinical detachment. "This is pointless, James," she said. "Grandma and I weren't close. She never approved of my choices or lifestyle. Always thought I worked too much, cared too much about money." She fixed me with a sharp stare. "Just like you do." She was proud. "Of your accomplishments," I countered. "She just worried about what they cost you." Jessica laughed coldly. "Says the underachiever who spent his youth gardening with an old woman instead of building a future. Let's cut to the chase. Did she leave anything of actual value, or was the estate as empty as her funeral?" The words stung, but I maintained my composure. "There will be a family meeting this Saturday at her farmhouse. Everyone needs to be there. I have plans. Cancel them," I said firmly. "This is your final opportunity to honor her wishes. If you choose not to come, you forfeit any claim to what she left behind." She narrowed her eyes. "So there is something worth having." I simply smiled and left, knowing she would be there. They all would. The following Saturday, I arrived at Grandma's farmhouse early. The property looked beautiful in the summer light. Her gardens still thriving thanks to the local teenager I had hired to maintain them after she moved to the care facility. The old place had good bones, as she used to say. One by one they arrived. Uncle Robert in his luxury SUV, Aunt Sarah and her husband in their immaculate sedan, Cousin Mike begrudgingly carpooling with them. Jessica was last, pulling up in her sports car, sunglasses firmly in place even though clouds had moved in. They gathered awkwardly in the living room, no one quite sure how to interact in this space so full of memories they'd chosen to ignore. Family photos lined the walls, holidays, birthdays, graduations, moments where they had briefly performed familial duty before returning to their separate lives. "Thank you all for coming," I began, standing by the fireplace where a portrait of Grandma in her younger years hung. "Before we discuss the inheritance, Grandma Eleanor left a request. She asked that we each share a memory of her, something personal that meant something to us." The silence that followed was deafening. "This is ridiculous," Jessica finally said. "We're adults. Can we skip the sentimental games?" "It's not a game," I replied evenly. "It's a final request from a woman who raised all of us in different ways. If you can't think of a single meaningful memory to share, perhaps that says something about why we're in this situation." Uncle Robert cleared his throat. "I remember she taught me to fish. Summer of '79. I caught a trout, and she showed me how to clean it and cook it." He looked momentarily wistful before his expression hardened again. "But we need to be practical here. What are the assets? The house obviously needs work, but the land might be valuable for development." Aunt Sarah looked horrified. "You can't develop this land. It's been in the family for generations." It was the first hint that anyone besides me cared about Grandma's legacy. "Oh, now you care about family history?" Jessica snapped. "Where was, that sentiment when she needed rides to doctor appointments?" The meeting quickly devolved into accusations and old resentments bubbling to the surface. I let them argue for a few minutes before I quietly placed a document on the coffee table. Their bickering stopped as they all stared at the paper. "What is that?" Cousin Mike asked, leaning forward. "Grandma Eleanor's net worth statement as of last month," I said simply. "As executor of her estate, I've spent the past few weeks getting everything in order." Uncle Robert snatched up the paper, his eyes widening as he read. He passed it wordlessly to Jessica, whose composure finally cracked. $43 million? She whispered, her voice suddenly small. That's impossible." "She was an excellent investor," I explained. "She lived simply by choice, not necessity. The sustainable energy companies she backed early, the organic farming initiatives everyone mocked her for supporting, the land she preserved instead of developed. It all paid off exponentially. Why didn't she tell us?" Aunt Sarah asked, tears forming in her eyes. Whether from regret or missed opportunity, I couldn't tell. "She did tell you in her way," I replied. "She talked about her investments constantly, about the future of sustainable technology, about the value of the land. No one listened because you'd already decided she had nothing valuable to say." I handed each of them an envelope. "Her will is very specific. These letters explain her decisions." They tore into the envelopes with the enthusiasm they should have shown for her wisdom when she was alive. As they read, I watched their expressions transform from anticipation to shock to dismay. Grandma had indeed left them inheritances, but with conditions. For Uncle Robert, she had left $1 million dedicated to establishing a scholarship fund for underprivileged children, which he would help administer while volunteering weekly at a literacy program. For Aunt Sarah, she had left her collection of rare first editions and a sizable donation to the local library in Sarah's name, with the requirement that Sarah participate in the weekly reading program she would now sponsor. Cousin Mike received the vintage car he had always admired, along with funding to complete his abandoned degree, with the stipulation that he mentor younger students. And for Jessica, perhaps the most pointed legacy, shares in an ethical investment fund worth several million, which would remain in trust until she completed a year of weekly volunteer work at the elder care facility, where Grandma had spent her final years. "This is manipulative and possibly not even legal," Jessica said, her voice shaking. "She can't control us from the grave." "The will has been reviewed by 3 separate law firms," I replied calmly. "It's ironclad. You can contest it, of course, but the alternative is clearly stated." They all turned to the second page of their letters, where the same paragraph appeared. "If you choose not to accept these terms, your portion will be added to the community foundation being established in my name, which will support the causes I valued throughout my life. The choice is yours, to receive your inheritance while growing as a person, or to reject both." "And what about you?" Uncle Robert demanded. "What did you get for being her favorite?" I looked around at the beloved farmhouse, at the land that had given me sanctuary throughout my youth. "This place," I said simply, and the joy of seeing her legacy honored properly. I let them sit with that for a moment before continuing. There's one more thing she wanted you to see. I opened my laptop and played a video recording from 6 months ago, one of Grandma's lucid days. Her face appeared on screen, thin but smiling, her eyes still bright with intelligence. "My dear family," she began, "if you're watching this, then I've passed on, and James is carrying out my wishes. I want you to know that I loved each of you deeply, even when you couldn't find time for me. Money has never been what matters most in life, though I suspect by now you've learned I had more of it than you thought." She paused to adjust her glasses, a gesture so familiar it made my throat tighten. "What matters is how we treat each other when there seems to be nothing to gain. James was the only one who passed that test consistently. He gave me his time when I had nothing to offer but my company. The rest of you," she sighed deeply, "you chose differently. But I believe in second chances. I've structured my legacy, not as punishment, but as opportunity. A final gift to help you become the people I always knew you could be. Whether you accept it is your choice. I hope you choose wisely. I love you all." The video ended, leaving the room in profound silence. No one spoke for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Jessica was the first to rise, wiping tears I hadn't seen her shed in years. Without a word, she walked out the door. Uncle Robert followed shortly after, shoulders slumped. Aunt Sarah lingered, looking around the house as if seeing it for the first time. "She was remarkable, wasn't she?" she said quietly. "We really missed it." "Yes," I agreed. "But she gave you a chance to see it now." Over the following months, transformations occurred that I wouldn't have believed possible. Jessica began her volunteer work reluctantly at first, then with growing engagement. During our monthly check-ins, she shared stories of the elderly residents she was getting to know, admitting that many reminded her of Grandma. Uncle Robert threw himself into the scholarship program with unexpected enthusiasm, his business acumen actually proving valuable in maximizing its impact. Aunt Sarah discovered a passion for literature that had been dormant since college, and Cousin Mike finally completed his education. As for me, I renovated the farmhouse, keeping its character while making it more sustainable. I expanded the gardens and opened them to community education programs. I continued my architectural practice, but now with a focus on green building and affordable housing, combining my skills with Grandma's values. 1 year after the funeral, we gathered again at the farmhouse, this time for a celebration of Grandma Eleanor's birthday. The atmosphere couldn't have been more different. There was genuine conversation, laughter, and surprisingly little mention of money. As evening fell, we sat on the porch where Grandma had taught me about poetry and stars and the things that truly matter. Jessica joined me after the others had gone inside. "You knew all along, didn't you?" she asked quietly. "About the money, about what she was trying to teach us." I shook my head. I knew she had investments, but not the extent. I just knew her, which was worth more than any financial knowledge. Jessica was silent for a long moment. "I missed so much," she finally said. "We all did. For what? A few more hours at the office? A few more deals? A little more status? But you're here now," I reminded her. That would have mattered most to her. Above us, the stars emerged in the clear Vermont sky. The same stars Grandma had named for me during those precious childhood summers. I thought of her final journal entry, which I'd found among her papers. My greatest assets were never in the bank. They were in the garden, in the books, in the quiet moments with those I loved. James understood. I hope someday the others will, too. They finally did, Grandma, but I was still the only one at your funeral, and I'll never forget that. Thank you for taking the time to read this story. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share with others who might appreciate these emotional journeys. Your engagement helps us create more content like this. Remember, family is precious. Cherish the time you have with loved ones before it's too late.